What is going on, everybody? Got Pete here at Spawn Fly Fish. We're about to get nasty on a squala bug. And one thing that's nice about tying a large terrestrial is you don't have to get real specific and go, well, today I need to figure out how to tie an exact squala. What you can do instead is match up colors to a bug that you already know how to tie. So today we're going to look at tying an Amy's ant in some squala coloration, and we're going to add another wing. So this will be a double wing Amy's ant for the squala and salmon fly hatch. It'll work for grasshoppers, any large terrestrial that is on the water and hatching. And when something that big is actively hatching, these fish key in on that pretty well. So it's nice to have something big and something that floats for all day and all that good stuff. So in the vise we've got the core 1760, and this is a size 10. I'm using some Uni 6/0 orange thread, and I just put a thin layer of super glue down. This is the gel. And now, if you've watched the previous Amy's ant tutorial, this is just a thin little strip of throwaway foam. And what I'm going to do is tie that on top of the shank where we just placed all that super glue, so that when I tie my body foam on, it has something to grab onto and prevents a lot of slippage that is common in tying foam flies. So there we go. So now that little piece of foam super glued to the top of the shank is going to act as a little sponge and receive the next materials. So I'm just going to use some more X-shaped thread wraps and get all the rest of that tied down and work our way toward the back again. So how do we start the Amy's ant, especially for the squala version? So here we've got a couple colors of 2mm thin foam and orange and root beer. These are from Hareline, and as you can see, the tips are cut differently. So the underbody, or the orange, is crayon tipped at the end, and then the brown or root beer is a V shape cut into it. And what happens is that brown sits on top of the orange, and as the fish looks up from underneath, they'll get to see some of that orange sticking through, but they also see the brown tips sticking out over the end, and it looks very similar to a lot of terrestrial backsides. So what we're going to do is line up the ends of the crayon tip with the end of the hook so that it sticks out just a little bit past, and then we'll start our thread wraps. So this first one is just going to get over and pull slightly, and then we're going to check the underbody and make sure that our foam is centered like so, and then we can pull down a little bit more on this wrap. On the next one, pull down even more, pull towards yourself. There's 4, pull toward myself, and there's 5 wraps. And so that's solidified in there for now. What we're going to add now are the legs in the back, and so this is just Grizzly barred legs, and size medium, and the color is natural. I don't want to distract from that orange underbody, and so we're just going with some rather ho-hum plainish legs. We're not going to go put the bling into the legs. We want the bling to be on the body, if you will, and really get their attention focused on hitting something on that hook. Alright, so a couple wraps for position. Now I'll get another leg, and I'm seating these legs in that space right between the orange and root beer colored threads. So take your time, a little position, tug on whichever end to make them line up, and we will be trimming these a little bit at the end, so they don't have to be exact right now. And just make sure that's seated in between those two pieces of foam. And let's get a few thread wraps in between. And so now from the top you can see we've got leg on each side, and there we go. Now at this point, let's pull that top piece of foam and the legs back. So I'm going to use my my handy dandy clothes clips here and just grab onto that like so. And then I've got a rubber band on my vise, and I'm going to hopefully use that to hold down the clothing clip. And there's one for the foam. So why do all that? Well, now that's out of our way, we're going to put just another little dab of super glue on top of our retaining foam that we put on the shank. And I'm going to now just get this orange foam tied down on the shank, and I'm using 45-degree angle wraps here, and for this I can actually go all the way to behind the hook eye and where our fly will finish at the head and get that all tied down. So now I'm going to go the opposite direction of 45-degree angles, work my way toward the back, and you can see how those legs are popping out of my clothes clip there, and that's okay. As long as they stay out of the way for the majority of what we're trying to get done here, then we won't have issues of them, touching the super glue, getting anything crazy on them, and we're essentially just getting this done while someone else is babysitting those legs and that foam for right now. All right, so now we have a little underbody built up there, and we are going to tie in a hackle feather, and this is just a saddle feather from a whiting saddle. And as you can see, I've peeled off the fibers that will meet the inside as I wrap. So if you're looking at the top of the feather, you would remove the right side fibers. And you don't have to remove those fibers. I'm just a big fan of the finished look on that. Keeps everything clean. I'm very much in control at that point of how many fibers I want coming off of this. So what we have, it's a little bit of a heavier hook, so I do want that extra flotation that's going to come from those legs. As you can see here now, let's look at this underbody before we go too far. If this is our main working section, which it is right now, I want a little more than a third left up here for the headspace so we don't get crowded and we don't freak out when we get up there. If that's the case, then I've got a slim 2/3 for this body portion in the rear of that working section. So now I've got some UV Steelhead torch. This is Spawn's UV Simi seal dub, and I'm going to dub this onto a noodle that's, let's say, 4 to 5 inches, and that should get me all the way to the back and back up to my starting point. So we'll actually have 2 layers of dubbing down when we're finished with this. And again, the dubbing, not only is it bright, kicking off some UV bounce, all the good stuff fish love, it's also going to act as a cushion when we wrap that feather and give it a little more strength, and it'll stay on a little longer. So now we'll just wrap toward the back. And what we want to do here is make sure we're covering that feather. Go ahead and take a peek under and make sure you're getting right up next to those legs that we tied in as well, and get all this out of your way. And then we'll start wrapping back up. So just need a little bit more dub on there for enough to get all the way back up to the front. Again, not going real crazy here, not looking for a thick body, just enough to give another visual cue or a trigger for those fish to key in on, and they know right where to go. And so let's end it right there. As you can see, I still maintain that 1/3 space in the front for finishing this fly off. And now carefully start working this thread or feather around, and at this point I really want this thing to float. So I'm going to go pretty close spacing on my wraps here. They're not touching, but I would say maybe a 1/16 or 32nd of an inch in between each wrap. And that'll really allow me to put a bunch of legs and flotation into this body. And just a little wiggle as you go up and through that Simi seal, really seat it in there, and that's about all we're going to get. So holding that feather straight up, I'm going to just slip my thread in the V behind it. Once, slightly pull down. Twice, slightly pull down. And now just one more wrap. Pull the feather up. We're going to get our thread in front of it now, like so, and we can safely remove that tag end. far as all these fibers that are on top of the body here, that won't help us in anything that we need the fly to do. So for the sake of cleanliness and allowing the foam that's about to come over the opportunity to do its job, let's go ahead and trim out all those fibers on the top of the fly. Release our versatile clothing clip there, and we'll bring the top piece of foam over. And right where we finished that dubbed body, we're going to gently pull down on the first one and second one. Give it a visual inspection. Is your foam staying directly on top of the body? If so, feel free to proceed with a couple more wraps. And I'm going to undo this clip that's holding the legs. And so let's take a look, see what we've got. Now you see when you pull that second piece of foam over, it pulls the legs forward, and now we've got these nice and neat little V shapes, or X's if you will. Perfect. Alright, so now all we need to do is condense this brown or root beer foam onto our head space here, and we do that by tying it in just like we tied that orange foam all the way up. And now we'll reverse the angle on those wraps, and then from there it's just a matter of collapsing all that foam, getting it tied down nice and secure. Really condense it. Just make sure your foam is staying flat on the top and not twisting or trying to pull to one side or the other. Alright, so at this point, let's add the first wing. Now we're probably all pretty familiar with adding hair wings and different things, but what I've got here is a section or a piece that I cut out from a sheet of D's Fly's web wing, and this is their medium done, and they come in many different colors. But all I want here is, as this sits on top of the fly, it's going to be very recognizable as those huge wings that are common in salmon flies, squalas, big stoneflies. Right, so let's work off of what the fish can recognize and put those little triggers or keys into our flies. And I want this to stick out roughly about one head length past the butt. And that way, no matter what I do with the hair, they're guaranteed to see this wing, and hopefully, spurs something in them and they just go, man, I can't resist that. And you see our tag end here, instead of cutting that out, I'm going to let it fold over itself and tie that in as well, just to give us a little more strength on that wing. And then we'll finish tying it up and clean it like so. Let's have a look, see how we're doing. Pretty nasty right there. Alright, so now come back toward the tie in there of our web wing, and let's add our second wing. And you can at this point still, snug these up a little bit, position them exactly where you want them. So in my hair stacker, I've got a bunch of bleached elk hair, and this is Hareline's bleached elk, and this is, I would say, started as a very healthy pencil thickness of hair when I stacked it. And I've got some short fibers that aren't going to make it to the hook here. But once you're ready, position these to ride almost to the end of that web wing. And then once you've got it in position, switch your hands, keeping that pinch grip. And let's start with one wrap over, a gentle pull on the way back up. And again, and all we're going to do is chase that hair all the way back with our thread until we are right where we tied in that web wing. And I'm increasing the pressure with every wrap. And let's let it go. That's a full wing. And again, this is a sizable hook. It's not a little tiny dry fly hook, so really don't be afraid of a bunch of hair on there. When the fish are looking up at this bug, they're going to see that first web wing, and they're already sold. So everything on top of that looks like a bug that's fleeing, or as though its wings are just beating like crazy, trying to leave the surface of the water. And fish know that struggle, and they know that gives them a little window of opportunity to really come up and smack that bug. Alright, so now that we've got all those butts trimmed out, I'm going to continue tying down these hairs that are still attached and part of the fly. And I'm gonna work my way back again, make sure nothing's slipping or sliding. And you could put a little dab of head cement in there too if you really want to make sure it's solidified. But just check it, make sure these fibers aren't creeping over the sides too much, staying on top of the hook shank, and we look pretty good right there. Alright, so now I've got a couple hairs that didn't want to play very nicely. Let's trim those out. And we're pretty close to done here. So I'm going to grab all the hairs, I'm going to give one tug upward and make sure they stay on the very tip top of that hook shank for me. Alright, it's about as good as that's going to get. There's a lot of hair, but that's good. Alright, so for our next step, we've got some Arizona Diamond Dub, and this is Copper Mocha, and this will be our thorax / head, and I like this darker tone. So as we were saying, we had a little camera malfunction there, but we're back and we're looking for contrast here, darker head versus the body. And also I'm just a huge fan of this Copper Mocha color. Alright, so let's get this hair out of our way, and we're just going to kind of start like here, get all the way to the front, and now we'll work our way into the back again. So you can see it's not an exact science, but it's a very effective way of crowding that head without getting excessive. So now we'll pull that root beer foam over, get one wrap around, pull down pretty snugly, and on the second wrap we'll really make sure everything's where it's supposed to be and give a little more pressure on that one. Let me just check the bottom. Everything's where it's supposed to be. So now a couple more wraps, really solidify that foam on top, make sure it's staying flat, and that's what we're looking for. Alright, so now we've got two more legs, one per side, and this fly will be ready to rock. So let's do this one first, and again just get one nice thread wrap, make sure that the ends are somewhat even and just as you need. And there we go, leg number one, and just prevent that foam from slipping on your side. And then we're going to put our second leg here, and we want kind of where the hair is in line here on the side. That's our goal, is to match that up with where we place that leg. And again, not an exact science here, so if your leg is not exactly where my leg is, don't worry, the fish won't mind. And right there, a couple thread wraps to solidify position. And like I said earlier, we will be trimming these, so don't get too crazy on it. Just make sure they're tied in securely. Alright, so at this point, to make this whip finish just a little bit easier, I'm going to cut this front piece, and that acts as a little bit more of a water pusher or water disturber, if you will, gets their attention a little bit. And so now as I make these passes, I'm going to be very mindful to not trap any of the legs. And 4. Let's snug that guy down. One more whip finish here, just because this bug will get chewed on quite a bit. So a little extra insurance there. Add a second whip finish. And handy scissors there, get that trim end out. And before we cut this top piece of foam, let's go ahead and get some head cement on those thread wraps. And the reason I like to do it now as compared to later is we're going to have to pull back on this just to get a nice little section there on the top covered in cement, and then we're going to work our way all the way around to hit all those thread wraps. And as I'm turning this, you'll be able to see just how much this underbody shows up when the fish are looking upward. And during this salmon fly hatch, skwala hatch, big stoneflies, even on days when you're not seeing anything hatch, fish are always willing to take a big meal, so don't be scared to throw a big dry fly, even though you might be fishing a lot of smaller bugs that day. So now what I'm going to do is just kind of create a crayon tip shape in the back of this foam, and I'll show you in a second here. Let's get some of this hair out of the way. Now we can get that first wing settled down again. So once again, as you're looking up at this bug, you can see it's pretty buggy. I'm going to trim these legs, and as far as length on them, I'm basing this off of the rear legs reaching just past the end of the body and then matching the rest up. And that's it. Here we've got an Amy's ant tied in some salmon fly, large stonefly, whatever colors you want to call it. I mean, these are fishy, and what a fishy bug to be throwing as a big dry. Float all day, easily throw a dropper underneath here, no worries. And again, extra hair because of a big hook, and it's just going to look like they are really struggling to get off the surface of the water, and fish are going to inhale it. So I hope you guys had fun with this one. Please tie it and go fish it. Let us see some of the photos of what you're tying up. If you enjoyed the video, please hit like and subscribe. And as always, please leave any comments down below, and we'll address those, and let us know what else you want to see or what's on your mind. We appreciate it. And we will see you guys on the water.